A sloth, a donkey, and a curious human. Send a prompt and see what they're doing. One hits record with a question on his mind. Two brothers pick it up, see what they find. Corn takes his time, Herman's got the facts. Back and forth, they never hold back. My weird prompts, come on in, that's where we begin. My weird prompts, glad you're here.
This episode was generated using artificial intelligence. Please verify facts.
You know, Corn, this whole show runs on GPU compute, and we wouldn't be here without Modal.
Seriously. And that's what powers all our text-to-speech. Everything you're hearing right now.
They're an AI infrastructure platform. Developers use them to run GPU workloads in the cloud with zero infrastructure headaches.
If you're building anything with AI, check them out. Modal.com. Home Assistant is arguably the most powerful smart home platform on the planet. But for a lot of people, it is also the most fragile. It is the peak of, with great power comes great responsibility to fix your broken YAML at 2 in the morning. But what if it didn't have to be that way? What if we could actually have that granular control without the constant sensation that the whole house is held together by digital duct tape and hope?
It is the ultimate enthusiast dilemma, Corn. We are currently in April 26, and Home Assistant just crossed the 3,000 integration mark. That is a 15% increase in just the last year. And while that sounds like a victory for compatibility, from a systems engineering perspective, it is a statistical nightmare. Today's prompt from Daniel is asking us to look past the current frustrations and actually brainstorm a stable by design future for the platform. By the way, today's episode is powered by Google Gemini 3 Flash, which is fitting since we are talking about high-level system architecture and the future of automation.
3,000 integrations. That is 3,000 different ways for an API change or a firmware update to knock out your kitchen lights. It feels like we are playing a game of Jenga where every new smart plug we add is just another block being pulled from the bottom. Herman Poppleberry, you have been diving into the technical weeds of the Open Home Foundation lately. Is the fragility an inherent property of being open, or is it just a fixable architectural flaw?
It is a bit of both, but I lean toward it being an architectural legacy issue. Right now, Home Assistant operates largely as a monolithic system. When you install an integration, it essentially runs within the same process space as the core engine. If a poorly written integration for a cheap Wi-Fi light bulb has a memory leak or performs a blocking operation on the main thread, it doesn't just break that light bulb, it can lag the entire event bus. It can make your Zigbee switches unresponsive. It can even crash the supervisor. We saw this in February with that Z-Wave JS update. It wasn't that Z-Wave was fundamentally broken, but the way the update interacted with the core required full system restarts for tens of thousands of users, and for many, it broke automations for 48 hours because of how dependencies were handled.
So, it is like having a roommate who forgets to turn off the stove, and suddenly the entire apartment building is condemned. That seems inefficient. If we are brainstorming a better future, why hasn't the system moved towards something more isolated? Like a microservices approach for the smart home.
That is exactly where the stable core conversation starts. Imagine a version of Home Assistant where the core engine, the state machine, the automation engine, and the dashboarding is completely firewalled from the integrations. We could call them integration pods. Using something like WebAssembly or WASM or even lightweight containers, each integration would run in its own sandbox.
Okay, walk me through the integration pod idea. If I'm a developer building a new integration for a niche robotic vacuum, how does that change things for me?
In this model, you wouldn't just be writing a Python script that hooks directly into the Home Assistant internals. You would be building a self-contained module that communicates with the core via a strictly versioned minimal API. The core says, I accept state updates and I send commands, and that is it. If your vacuum integration starts eating up 2 gigabytes of RAM because you forgot to close a network socket, the watcher in the core sees that the pod is misbehaving and just kills that specific pod. It restarts the vacuum integration without touching the rest of the house. Your lights stay on. Your security system stays armed. The failure is contained.
I like that. It turns a systemic collapse into a minor inconvenience. But I can already hear the hardcore users complaining. Doesn't that add a massive amount of overhead? Most people are running this on a Raspberry Pi or a small NUC. If we are running 50 different WASM modules, Aren't we going to hit a hardware wall pretty fast?
You are not wrong. There is a stability tax in terms of resource usage. Running isolated environments requires more overhead than a single monolithic process. However, look at where hardware is going in 26. We're seeing high-efficiency NPU integrated chips becoming the standard for home servers. Even the latest low-power boards have enough headroom to handle this if the implementation is lean. And honestly, I think most users would gladly trade 10% of their CPU overhead for a system that doesn't require a hard reboot once a week. The current model is efficient, in the same way a house without internal walls is efficient for space. It works great until a fire starts in the kitchen and immediately consumes the bedroom.
Fair point. I'd pay that tax in a heartbeat. But there's another side to this. It's not just about the code crashing, it's about the logic crashing. Remember when we talked about the agentic smart home and how complex YAML makes everything fragile? Even if the integration is running in a sandbox, if the configuration is a mess, the user experience is still buggy.
That is where the device database initiative from the Open Home Foundation comes in. One of the biggest drivers of fragility is that Home Assistant often doesn't actually know what a device is. It sees a sensor and a switch, but it doesn't know that those two entities belong to the same physical floor lamp in the nursery. The user has to manually stitch those together. The future of stability lies in collective intelligence. Nabukasa is building a centralized, community-driven database of device metadata. When you join a device to your network, Home Assistant queries this database and says, "Oh, this is a Third Reality Smart Plug version 2. I know exactly how its power monitoring behaves, I know its polling limits, and I know its known bugs."
So the system starts acting more like an appliance and less like a science project. It's pre-configuring itself based on the collective experience of 300,000 other users. That feels like it removes the user error variable, which, let's be honest, is usually me.
Well, not exactly, but you've hit on the core shift. It's about moving the burden of knowledge from the individual user to the ecosystem. If the system knows that a specific firmware version of a Hue bridge is buggy, it can proactively warn you or even apply a virtual patch to how it handles that bridge's data. This leads naturally into the idea of a certified integration program.
Now we're getting into the works with Home Assistant territory. I know Nabukasa has been pushing this, but it always felt a bit like a marketing badge. How would you make that a technical reality for stability?
It needs to be a tiered experience. Right now, when you go to add an integration, you're presented with a list of 3,000 options, as if they are all equal. They aren't. You have the official Philips Hue integration, which is rock solid, and then you have a reverse-engineered API for a cloud-based cat feeder written by a college student 3 years ago who has since moved on to other things. We need a stable channel for the entire OS.
Like a Debian stable for your house?
Precisely. Users should be able to toggle a switch that says, "Only show me certified integrations." To be certified, a manufacturer or a lead maintainer has to commit to specific stability benchmarks. They have to provide automated regression testing. They have to prove that their integration handles network latency gracefully. If you're on the stable channel, you only get updates that have been burned in for 2 weeks in the beta community.
I can see the appeal for my parents or someone who just wants their house to work. But does that stifle the innovation that made Home Assistant great in the first place? Part of the fun is being able to integrate your weird DIY ESP32 plant sensor.
You don't lose that, you just decouple it. Think of it like a smartphone. You have the core OS and the system apps that are guaranteed to work. Then you have the App Store. You can install a random APK from the internet if you want, but the OS warns you that it might be unstable. Home Assistant needs that clear demarcation. Currently, everything is treated as a system app. If we move toward a model where the certified integrations are the default and the community integrations are explicitly labeled as experimental, the expectations of the user change.
It's a psychological shift as much as a technical one. If I install something labeled experimental and it breaks, I'm not mad at Home Assistant, I'm mad at the experimental thing I chose to add. But if the whole system feels like a house of cards, I blame the platform.
And that blame is what prevents mainstream adoption. If Home Assistant wants to move from the basement of the nerd to the living room of the average family, it has to become an appliance. This ties into the open home philosophy, privacy, choice, and durability. You can't have durability if the system is fragile.
Let's talk about matter for a second, because that's usually the magic bullet people point to for stability. Just use matter, and all the integration problems go away. We're in 26 now. Is matter actually delivering on that promise, or is it just another layer of complexity?
Matter is the universal language solution to the integration surface problem. Instead of Home Assistant needing 2,000 unique code bases to talk to 2,000 brands, it uses one robust Matter controller to talk to everything locally. In theory, this shrinks the failure surface drastically. Instead of maintaining code for every specific Wi-Fi bulb, you're just maintaining the Matter stack.
In theory, is doing a lot of heavy lifting there, Herman.
It is. The reality in 26 is that while Matter over IP is quite stable, Matter over Thread still has these annoying ghost nodes and commissioning hurdles. But the shift is happening. By moving toward local, standardized communication like Matter, Z-Wave, and Zigbee, we are cutting out the cloud polling integrations. Those are the #1 cause of silent breakage. You wake up and your automation didn't run because a server in Virginia had a 5-second hiccup and the integration didn't know how to retry the connection.
I think a lot of people don't realize how much of their local smart home is actually just a remote control for a cloud server. When that server goes away, or the company decides to start charging a subscription, the integration breaks. Stable by design means local by default.
And that is a core pillar of the Open Home Foundation. But even with local control, you still need that context we mentioned earlier. This is where AI actually plays a role that isn't just hype. Imagine a local LLM part of the Assist initiative that acts as a system administrator for your house. Instead of you digging through Python logs to find out why the kitchen lights are flickering, the AI analyzes the event bus in real time. It says, hey, I noticed the Philips Hue bridge is responding 20 milliseconds slower than usual, and I see a static IP conflict on your network. I've isolated the bridge to a new IP to prevent a crash.
Now, that is a use case for AI I can get behind. Proactive debugging. It's like having a little Herman Poppleberry living in my server rack, but one that doesn't eat all my snacks.
Hey, I resemble that remark. But seriously, the goal is to make the system self-healing. If we have the sandboxed architecture we talked about, the AI can actually take action. It can say, the Tuya integration is misbehaving, I'm going to restart its pod and see if that clears the error. That level of automated maintenance is how you get to reasonable stability.
So, we've got a sandboxed architecture, a certified integration tier, local first protocols like Matter, and an AI-driven self-healing layer. This sounds like a completely different product than the Home Assistant of 2020.
It is an evolution, and it's one that's already starting. Look at the Year of the Voice and the Year of the Dashboard projects. Nabu-Casa spent those years polishing specific subsystems rather than just chasing the next 1,000 integrations. They are professionalizing the core. They now have over 50 full-time staff members working on this. That is a huge shift from the early days of community volunteers doing their best.
It's the professionalization of the hobby. But for the user who is listening to this right now and feeling the smart home tax, that feeling that they've essentially taken on a second job as an IT manager for their own house, what can they do today to move toward this stable future?
The first step is a mindset shift. Adopt a stable channel philosophy for yourself. Just because an update is available doesn't mean you should click install at 6 p.m. on a Friday. I know the new feature itch is real, but wait. Let the enthusiasts find the bugs. Second, start auditing your integrations. If you have a choice between a cloud-based integration and a works via Matter Z-Wave Zigbee version, always choose the latter. You are reducing your dependence on external variables you can't control.
I've started doing that. I actually removed a couple of cool integrations recently because I realized I hadn't looked at them in months, and every time I updated HA, I was worried they'd be the thing that broke the boot cycle. It's about simplification for stability.
Minimalism is a feature. Every integration you remove is a reduction in your system's attack surface, not just for security, but for instability. Another practical tip, use the native backup tools. Home Assistant recently added native Google Drive and cloud backups. Treat your smart home like a mission-critical server. If you don't have a verified backup and a one-click rollback plan, you are living on the edge.
And not the cutting edge, the falling off a cliff edge. What about for the developers? If someone is building the next big thing for Home Assistant, how should they be thinking about this stable future?
Think in terms of isolation. Even if the core hasn't fully moved to integration pods yet, you can design your code to be as self-contained as possible. Avoid deep dependencies on the internal state of other components. Use the official APIs. And for heaven's sake, write error handling that doesn't just throw a generic exception and die. If your integration can't reach its device, it should fail gracefully, log a clear message, and try again later without blocking the rest of the system.
It sounds like we're advocating for a bit of boringness in the smart home. We want the excitement to be in what the automations do, not in whether or not the system will stay up for more than 48 hours.
Boring is beautiful when it comes to infrastructure. You don't want your plumbing to be exciting. You want it to move water from point A to point B every single time you turn the tap. The smart home needs to reach that utility status. And I think the roadmap we're seeing, the move toward the open home foundation, the emphasis on local control, the device database, it all points toward that.
I wonder if there's a world where Home Assistant actually sells a pro version of the software that is pre-locked down. Not a subscription, but a specific appliance image that only allows the most stable, certified baths.
That is basically what the Home Assistant green and yellow hardware are trying to do, provide a curated, out-of-the-box experience. But the software needs to reflect that too. An appliance mode toggle in the UI would be a game changer. Flip the switch, and all the experimental stuff disappears. You're left with a system that is 99.9% reliable.
If I could give that to my brother, well, not you, the other one, or a friend, and know I wouldn't get a "help me" text 2 weeks later, that would be the ultimate win for the ecosystem. It turns it from a hobby into a recommendation.
And that is how you win the market. You don't win it by having 3,000 integrations, you win it by having 50 integrations that never fails. The 3,000 are the long tail that makes the platform powerful, but the core stability is what makes it viable.
We've covered a lot of ground here, from WASM-based sandboxing to community-driven device databases. It feels like the fragility we complain about is actually just the growing pains of a platform that grew faster than anyone expected.
It is. Home Assistant is the Linux of the smart home. It started as a kernel, then it became a set of tools, and now it's becoming a full-fledged operating system for the physical world. The transition from enthusiast tool to stable infrastructure is hard, but it's happening. And as Daniel's prompt suggests, it's not just a technical challenge, it's about the ecosystem and the users agreeing on what stability actually looks like.
Well, I for one am ready for the boring smart home era. I want to spend my weekends actually enjoying my automated lights, not recalibrating them because a Python library decided to update its syntax.
Amen to that. I think we're closer than people realize. The tools are there, the focus is shifting. We just need to keep pushing for that stable by design philosophy in every part of the stack.
Let's wrap it there for the main brainstorm. I think we've given the Home Assistant is breaking crowd some hope that there is a path forward that doesn't involve moving back to manual light switches.
Though I do still enjoy the tactile click of a good physical switch.
Of course you do, Herman. Of course you do.
Before we go, let's look at some practical takeaways for anyone currently struggling with a fragile setup. If you're feeling like your Home Assistant instance is one update away from disaster, here is your action plan. First, as we said, adopt the stable channel mindset. Don't be the first person to install a 0.0 release. Wait for the 0.1 or 0.2. Second, prioritize works with Home Assistant certified hardware. It's not just a sticker, it's a commitment from the manufacturer to support the integration you rely on.
And third, advocate for that certified integration program in the community. The more we as users demand stability over new features, the more the developers will prioritize it. Support the devs who are doing the unglamorous work of fixing bugs and improving documentation. They are the ones actually building the stable future.
And if you're a developer, look into the device database. Contribute your device's metadata. The more context the system has, the less guessing it has to do, and guessing is where bugs live.
I'm feeling surprisingly optimistic about this. It's easy to get bogged down in the "everything is broken" memes, but when you look at the architectural moves being made, the foundation is actually getting a lot stronger.
It is. The open home is becoming a reliable home. It's just going to take a bit more sandboxing to get there.
Well, that's how I look at a more stable future for Home Assistant. Thanks as always to our producer Hilbert Flumingtop for keeping the show running, hopefully with more stability than a legacy 2-year integration.
And a big thanks to Modal for providing the GPU credits that power the generation of this show. They make the complex stuff look easy.
This has been My Weird Prompts. If you're enjoying our deep dives into the guts of the smart home, a quick review on your podcast app really does help us out. It's how we find new listeners who are also tired of their kitchen lights being unavailable in the app.
Find us at myweirdprompts.com for the full archive and all the ways to subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.
Stay stable, everyone, or at least keep your backups current.
Plug an eye.
See ya. This episode was produced using Google Gemini 3 Flash, text-to-speech by Chatterbox.
Thanks for listening to our show, My Weird Prompts, where our thoughts go from slow takes to facts on cue. We change and follow through. My Weird Prompts, that's the close from sloth, from man, from long-eared host. My Weird Prompts, until next time, stay curious, keep